Thanks for doing this. A lot going on in comms this week. I figured we could chat about some of the big things. So, CrowdStrike, politics, Biden announcement, and then whatever else is going on. There's probably something breaking live as we're talking.
Got it.
Sound good?
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Thanks for having me. Can you just start with like a breakdown of the CrowdStrike comms strategy that's happened? Because I know blue screens of death all over the place. I fortunately wasn't traveling, wasn't affected. I had a lot of friends that were. People seem really upset. And I know that there was a tweet that you reacted to, but can you just give me like the high level to start off and then we can discuss it?
Yeah, I think strategy might be a little bit generous here. And I honestly, I feel bad for the CrowdStrike people because 99.99 something percent of employees were not responsible for global blue screens of death. And they are all working like 96 hours straight to try to fix it. So, um, first of all, I just feel sympathy for all the people whose fault it isn't. And I feel the opposite of sympathy for the people who made everybody much madder at them than they needed to be. So clearly, some committee of corporate comms people and lawyers wrote this very heartless, indifferent sounding tweet, which became the first thing to really travel. And it was obviously written by lawyers because it seemed designed to avoid like legal liability.
Mm.
And so what ended up happening was everybody was already pissed. They got super duper more pissed. The company had to go and apologize and try to sound human like a few hours later anyway. But at that point, it was so obviously under duress that they got no credit for it. So it was like the worst of all worlds where you come out sounding like you don't care, then you have to later try to sound like you care, but it's too late. There's no difference in amount of like legal liability. Not that that matters anyway, because there's forensics here. It's not going to be like there's going to be lawsuits. It's not going to be decided by whether you sounded too human in a tweet. And then at the end of the day, it just felt like a big fiasco, which will I think get to this, got saved by all the big politics news over the weekend. Like people's
Oh yeah.
brains kind of reset. They got lucky.
Yeah, that's super funny. It's interesting. I mean, you've been in these rooms, like how real is the legal liability stuff?
It's real. But sometimes getting sued is better. And sometimes, so okay, a few things. One is there's a trade-off between increasing legal liability versus losing trust, and you just have to know that that's a trade-off. Like you can choose, I would rather torch trust and minimize legal liability. Fine, just make it a conscious choice. But there's a lot of times when just taking the lawsuit or fighting it in court is cheaper than the damage to your reputation, which can be a lot more expensive and take longer to repair. So that's one thing. Two is there's cases where it actually doesn't change legal liability. Like, again, in cases where there's forensics involved, a tweet is not going to supersede that. And people sometimes default to um, claiming there's going to be legal liability just because they're scared and they want to be risk averse. And then thirdly, the CEO has to just make their own decisions here. Like you get advice from lawyers, you get advice from comms people, but sometimes you have to follow your gut. And if you feel like you owe people an apology, you should just give the apology. So, like, what did this feel? How did this feel for you watching this unfold? What would you have done differently? Just straight, just founder instincts.
Yeah, honestly, I don't really know. I don't use CrowdStrike, and so it was very abstract. Like I struggle to even analyze it because I think the first and probably most important thing is probably to understand who they're trying to talk to. Because if they're trying to talk to, you know, random developers on Twitter, random entrepreneurs, tech people on Twitter, absolutely they messed up. It sounds like it from your analysis. But if they're really just trying to talk to like a few Fortune 500 companies who buy this stuff and that's all that matters, that's a very different calculation, probably, I would imagine.
Hmm.
It kind of doesn't matter if they're like the current thing and the villain of the day for a weekend, then they get memory hold because of the political news. And it doesn't matter that some random, Twitter person didn't like them for a day, as long as they didn't lose Disney as a client or whatever. And so
Hmm.
I'm wondering, and I don't know how real this is, it feels like they're almost in like there's like an odd game of like, you talk to these Fortune 500 CEOs, like they're all real people, and maybe they're all just waiting for like one person to step in and the water's warm, and then act like a normal person,
Hmm.
and then they all can, and then they can all drop the corpo speak. But I guess my question is how much of the answer and the statement was you would change the facts or you would change the tone. If you could only change one, would you like share more information, share more data, change the facts that the company was putting front and center, or would you instead just, hey, the lawyer signed off on the facts. We just need to restate the tone and make this sound less corpo, less more human.
Mhm.
Which one do you think is more important if you had to pick one?
This is a good question. So, first of all, you're right. What we're seeing unfold on Twitter, whether they're getting dunked on, whether it's going viral in a good way, bad way, it is only on the surface. Like how the phone call goal goes between Kurtz and like Satya Nadella is probably more important than a lot of that. Like just calling your customers directly. If you have a good crisis plan in place, which I'm not sure they did, it's hard to tell. First of all, if you're a cybersecurity company, you should have a crisis plan in place with a draft statement that's already done well in advance of anything happening. So maybe they had that and it wasn't a very good statement, but people were saying, oh, they need to be reacting on the spot, give them some slack. Well, ideally, they had this statement written out like months ago. Um, but one of the things in that plan is the CEO needs to start making phone calls. So you call maybe members of the board, you might call your most important customers, your most important investors. You need to be saying stuff to employees. So there's a lot going on underneath the surface that we don't see playing out on Twitter. So I'm glad you brought that up. In terms of what's more important, I think for the public communication, tone is a lot more important because what you're doing is vibes. What you're
Yeah.
doing is putting out the vibes of please trust us. We're really sorry. You almost want to dunk on yourself so hard that it's less fun for people to dunk on you and they actually start to feel sorry for you. You just want to kind of take off the table the sense that you refuse to be accountable and it's people's jobs to force you to become accountable because that can get really ugly. The information, the facts are important, but you have direct ways to communicate with customers. I don't know on that day, like maybe nobody's computer was working, but
Oh my
most
god.
companies have ways, like most companies have ways that they can directly send emails or messages to their customers. Maybe it shows up in the product or they can just call their most important customers. So the facts I would as- ho- hope and assume are getting out. And the public statement is, yeah, really for putting out the right vibes.
Yeah. Yeah, the vibe line is very, very tricky. Like lawyers, it's almost a quantitative exercise. It's very law feels very algorithmic to me. It feels very there is a right answer in many respects, in many ways.
Mm,
A lawyer can say if we say this, our legal liability is minimized, and maybe it's a little bit squishy, but it's pretty knowable. Whereas the vibes are good if we take a shot at dunking on ourselves here. Like that can go
yeah.
wildly wrong. We've seen this in politics or I mean, I don't even. It's hard to tell how these things were responded. Maybe this is a good bridge to the Biden news, but when
Yeah.
a lot of people were dunking on Biden for putting out these jokes, "I'm sick," when he was in fact sick.
I
I actually
know.
think that's a
He
like a
was
kind of a
literally
revolutionary
sick.
format in terms of just
Yeah.
X post, like
Yeah.
having two words and then following it up with a second tweet that you have to click into. I think whoever posted that like was very smart about how to format a tweet. Um, People were kind of like, is this good? Is this bad? It didn't seem to matter.
Mm,
Obviously dropped out a few days later, but
yeah.
but it seems almost, I don't know. It seems like with our politicians, we've kind of embraced the fact that it's a circus, that there's going to be jokes on Twitter. Hillary Clinton quote tweeted Donald Trump in 2016 saying, delete your account. It's like a very
Hmm.
Twitter native thing. And I'm sure these are all like interns running these things, but it's allowed to happen. I guess
Yeah.
it's funny to me that like at a company like CrowdStrike, there are less interns shit posting than at, the White House.
Yeah. I know. Well, the interns were all scared and their computers were bricked. I don't know
Yeah,
what
but
was happening.
it's
Like
like
it's just
how
very
is
old school.
CrowdStrike? I mean, CrowdStrike is very important, obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's very important. We saw that, but it's not more important than the government of the United
I know.
States. And yet the
Well,
government can joke around, but CrowdStrike can't. Like, I now you've convinced me, and now I'm like, they should have been like posting BSOD memes and just being like, man, we got screwed. Like, we're idiots. Like we
maybe.
gotta get through this.
Maybe. I think step one is find out how bad it is. Like if people literally died.
Yeah,
Or,
then yeah,
let's say like you took out an ER or something and people died or someone couldn't get to the hospital to give birth or whatever.
yeah.
Then you probably want to know that first. But it
Yeah,
is interesting that
like
the
the
White
best
House
case
is
scenario would be
different.
like if it only affected CrowdStrike billing
Yeah.
software
Yeah,
and they
yeah,
lost
yeah.
their money, and it would
Yes.
be like we fucked up. It's purely on us. There's no
Yeah.
one else that really was affected. In fact, many other people were positively affected, so we can joke about this. The
Yeah.
opposite is like if something really serious happens externally and it doesn't affect CrowdStrike people at all, then yeah. So it is a continuum here.
Well, so let's segue to politics here on this note because humor is incredibly disarming, and
Yeah,
this is why people like Trump. Not everybody,
yeah,
and not everybody who likes him is for this reason, but a lot of people can't not like Trump because he is objectively the most hilarious person maybe alive in America right now.
yeah,
He's definitely the most funny president.
yeah.
And he uses it really, and it creates this sort of shield around him where he might do something that for somebody else is a career ender, but for him is just him being really hilarious once again. And it
Yeah,
goes back like you sort of set expectations that you're just a kooky guy who says wild things, and you can get away with a lot.
yeah.
I'm not sure about the Biden White House
I'm
people
trying to think of
though.
like
It felt like they were grasping at straws.
yeah, like I don't know. I listened to. I mean, I guess the last thing. Why I'm hesitating there is the last thing I listened to of Trump's was the RNC speech, and it was very serious because it was like grappling with this idea of like surviving an assassination attempt. So I wasn't exactly laughing out loud, and I think I was also listening to it on like 2x because it was like really long and slow.
It's so
But
what is it? It was like an hour.
I think it was over an hour. I think somebody said it was like 77 minutes. Um,
It's a
but
show of stamina.
yeah, I mean, clearly, like you get media trained by being on reality TV for I don't know how long, a decade. Like, there's going
Yeah.
to be some cadence to the humor that
Yeah.
comes through, and he's just been able to treat the rallies as sets. He does crowd work. He knows how to break out.
That's
Every
true.
comedian, and in fact, I think the people who have drawn the most attention to Trump's like comedy, because obviously like you can't really trust the right wing because they're gonna be like everything everyone says is amazing and funny, and then you get the left wing is gonna be like it was so serious and terrible, like
It's
you could never.
fascist.
But you listen to a lot of like the centrist comedians who are like I don't vote, and they will tell you Trump's funny, and I trust their opinion because they understand what makes for a good joke and good cadence, and it makes sense that he
Mhm.
spent so long that he became funny, and I'm sure that helps with a lot of comms, but I don't think he I I'm trying to think if he's ever used humor in any sort of like serious communication. It seems very much not
He
so.
Okay,
I don't
I
know.
don't know if this was intentional, but there were even super funny moments in his description of being shot. This is the most serious part of a really serious speech, and I didn't see all of it because it was
Yeah,
late and so long. Um, but he was talking about how much blood there was. Again, this is supposed to be serious, and it's a serious topic, obviously. But he was like, "There's blood everywhere. There was so much blood." I wish I had practiced my Trump impression. I'm actually getting better at it. So
ah,
much blood. And then he talks about going to the doctor, and the doctor tells him that ears tend to bleed a lot. They're the
yeah,
part of the body that maybe bleeds the most. And he pauses and goes, "We learned something that day."
yeah. Is that
And the fact that
intentional? I don't. It is
I,
funny.
I
You're
I
right. We
can't
learned something
tell.
that
Like I
day.
can't tell if he meant for that to be funny
Yeah,
or if his delivery. So Dave Chappelle has this where he'll say stuff that isn't actually the joke, and people in the audience just start laughing because they think it's the punchline because he just delivers stuff in a funny way.
yeah,
And that might be Trump. I mean it's definitely a liability, but it's sort of a shield too. It's definitely an asset.
yeah. There's this weird narrative that happens in all these comm cycles that I want to ask you about, um, because I think it's getting to like this breaking point. Basically, with both the assassination attempt and the CrowdStrike thing, I saw backlash to it saying this is because of DEI. And I am super I feel like do you remember during the vaccine thing when there were a lot of vaccine skepticism and the vaccine skeptics, like anytime anyone died, they'd
Yeah,
be like,
exactly.
were they
Vaxxed.
vaxxed? And it'd
Yeah.
be like Willie Mays died.
Yeah.
He's 93, by the way. And people were like, vaxxed. And it's
Vaxxed.
like, okay, like probably not. Like that's probably nothing. But then it became a
And that's
joke
become a
meme.
theme. Yeah, yeah, it's a meme now
It
because
became a
it was
joke meme
everywhere.
where it'd be like
Yeah.
a bridge fell down. They'd be like, "Was the bridge vaxxed?" Or like just like random like things that
Yeah.
couldn't possibly be related to any sort of vaccine industry injury
Uh-huh.
would all of a sudden be people would just ask vaxxed, and it honestly makes me laugh every time.
It's
Um,
funny.
But I feel like that's what the DEI stuff is becoming, because the
Mhm.
CrowdStrike thing happened, and immediately people were like going and finding old like tweets where like they made their logo like rainbow colored, and they were like they supported Pride. That's why this is happening, and it's like I don't know that that's correlated at all, guys. Like, I get that, like, there's this culture war about DEI. Obviously, there's a lot of drawbacks with this stuff, and like companies need to work through this. And the new Alexander Wang MEI thing, meritocracy. This feels like a big step forward, but can we really blame everything that goes wrong on DEI as soon as it comes up? It just seems ridiculous to me.
Yeah, it's definitely entered just meme territory.
Yeah.
Like, I think what happens is when something gets repeated over and over,
Yep.
plus it's a little bit overblown or ridiculous or overplayed,
Yep.
plus it's catchy. So like vaxxed or D and I like
Yep. It's
it's
so
just catchy.
simple.
That's the formula for memedom. And
Yeah.
so I think it's just entered the annals of
Yeah.
memedom. And meritocracy now is having a moment too. Did you see the tweet from Daniel at Growing
Yeah.
Daniel, where he was like, go right now to CrowdStrike's Twitter and look for an old tweet where they talk about D and I post that. I
Oh, he
guarantee you
said that?
engagement. Yeah, he just did,
Yeah. Oh.
and then people actually did it. I don't know if they saw the tweet or not, but it's like it's an obvious formula
Yep,
for a
yep,
ton of
yep.
engagement.
Yeah, yeah. It's becoming it's hack. That's
Yeah,
what
it's
it
a hack.
is.
Yeah, it's a hack.
Throwing DEI allegations at things that probably have nothing to do with DEI allegations. Um, sorry, I got a phone call there. Is a hack bit at this point.
What did you think? What did you think of Biden comms yesterday?
I mean, my first reaction is just like I don't know. There's something weird about like the medium is the message, and there's something about I think maybe I don't, internally they've kind of decided that like when they use the text field on the X post, that has some humor, that is a flexible place, but for a really serious note like this, it had to be a screenshot of the text because there was
Hmm.
nothing about that that said this has to be a screenshot. It's not like it contained a photo that needed to come out of camera and needed to be shared. They could have shared that exact text on X as a native post, but they
Hmm.
chose to take a picture of a sheet of paper. And it's just, and I think that's just it's just very
That
interesting
was
because
interesting.
you have like the celebrity or like influencer version of this is like the notes app screenshot when someone like got in trouble
They
because it's like
should have done the notes app.
well, it's his version of the Notes app. It's the White
It
House's
is.
version of the Notes
It
app screenshot
is.
is you have to type out something serious because it's like, "Let's get serious,
On
guys.
letterhead.
I
Yeah.
want you to slow down." Because if it's in the text mode, you can be scrolling up and down. If it's an image, you have to click in, you have to zoom in, you have to engage with this.
Do you
It's a
think
little
they
bit
were working the
weightier.
algo? Do you think they heard
No,
that
no,
the
no.
algo rewards
It's not
images
about
stuff?
that. Um, it's about how like after we got bold and italics, everyone was like, Twitter needs a sarcasm font. Well, now we do have
Mhm.
italics, and it's not exactly a sarcasm font, but like you can use bold and italics when you do
Yeah.
an
But
announcement like you're
this is
going
the
direct.
gravitas
Yes,
font.
exactly, and perhaps like the screenshot of the serif font printed out like document is is a way to get people to kind of slow down and realize that hey, this isn't a joke. I know we joke around on this account, and this is actually important. I think this is important for founders. It's important for me. I like 90% of my posts are usually jokes and just shit posts because that's what we do on Twitter all day. Is we just like have fun with our friends and like a lot of times like we're not like breaking news.
Not me though. I'm adding your shit posting. I'm adding enterprise value.
Yes, 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 yes. You wouldn't dare. Um, but then at a certain point, you do need a way to kind of code switch and change what you're saying. So a lot of people do lowercase for jokes, like the lowercase on the first letter, and then uppercase like sentence case for something that's serious. And now I've stolen your going direct format from that original post that you made go so viral, and
Which one? The manifesto?
yeah, the manifesto. Like I love that. I have that in a Word doc, and then I can reference it if I'm trying to write something that's like serious. Seriously, it's
Amazing.
so helpful.
Wow.
And so the format as I understand it, I'm sure there's other secrets in there, but the format as I understand it is basically all caps, bold, header, one line. Then
Mhm.
it's like a subtitle within italics. Then
Mhm.
you use Roman numerals. I usually use numbers, but then you have like four headers, and those go, and so you're using like the hierarchy of communication weights and font weights to go.
Yeah.
All caps bold is a title case. All caps is a subheading. Then italics can be used here. Bold can be used sparingly, and so I don't know. Now we're just in the weeds on formats, but
But you know who's really good at this?
yeah.
Formats matter. That'll be the next swag T-shirt.
Oh yeah,
Formats
for
matter.
sure, for
Who's
sure, it's
really good at
important.
this
And so yeah,
is
I think they
wait, wait, but
discovered it.
Scott Alexander, Astral
Oh really?
Codex 10
Yeah,
is because he has these very long blog posts and
yeah,
they're very intentionally formatted and designed to take you through it and make you feel like there's a narrative.
sure, sure.
And he, I think, has a meta post about how he formats his posts. I'll try to find it and send it to you.
Yeah,
But yes,
yeah, it's important.
yesterday on Biden, I thought the reasons for how they did that initial dropout announcement were they were doing it for the history books. Like they knew this would be a moment in history,
Yeah,
and they wanted there to be an accompanying picture that was not like X.com formatting.
that's smart.
Um, I
Yeah,
thought that might be one reason. I thought that would also be maybe the reason they didn't include an endorsement for Kamala in the same post. Like just keep a clean post that announces the dropout and have that go in the history books,
yep, very
and then
smart.
the endorsement would be a separate thing. I don't know if this is their reason.
Yeah,
Maybe
people
this
were
is
saying
just
they were like
retro
scrambling and they
com.
didn't, but yeah, I think your argument makes a lot of sense, and it would be deliberate to keep them separate, especially because what happens if there's another dropout, then
Hmm.
or there's another change or something happens, and then he needs to change his endorsement. You want the flexibility to not have it be like
Yeah,
memorialized in that document.
yeah. I wonder if they were trying to avoid copy pasta too. You
Oh,
know,
sure, like, you could immediately like, it was, like, so wordy that it didn't lend itself to very many memes,
that's
and I
true.
and I do think that going off of video, because, Biden, people are obviously obsessed with the cognitive decline thing, but, like, if you listen to a 30-minute talk with him, like, it's not like he can't string a sentence together. That's not true. Like,
Hmm.
he hits if he's on a teleprompter, it's early, he's alert, he hits most sentences just fine, and he has his like kind of quirky cadence and is like a
Yeah,
little folksy about it. But then like one of the lines will be wrong, and it'll be wrong like in a pretty bad way. And then all of a sudden, like
I
that's the
know.
news story.
Yeah.
But like by not just going on video immediately, he like slowed down the news story, the cycle that will erupt. Because if
Hmm.
he mispronounces a single word in the way that me and you mispronounce words when
Interesting.
we're on this podcast, like we talk, and oh,
But you're gonna edit those out, so
I
they'll
just
have never
repeated the word
happened.
we 3 times because I'm just talking.
Yeah,
Like, these are normal things that anyone does. People
yeah.
will hyper fixate on those, and
That's
so he
true.
needs to like, kind of like delay that as long as possible so it doesn't become like a meme or something.
Yeah, 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 that's true. Last question: who do you think is doing a good job? Like, founder or company doing a good job with their comms or having a moment right now?
I mean, Raul is doing great at zero interest rates.
Yeah.
I mean,
With
IRL
Julius?
memes.
You mean for himself or for
Julius.
Julius?
Yeah, Julius, yeah. I mean, just, like, that's a fascinating story because he's, like I saw someone break it down because somebody was talking trash about him, and then somebody else broke it down, like, no, he actually has a really cool story because he was, like, an immigrant, didn't go to a top-tier school and, like, got into YC and all this stuff, but it's, like, he was, like, a phenomenal shit poster, was extremely popular among, like, the cool kids in tech, I guess you could say, and then uh, and then starts a company and then does that crazy Twitter prank where he went and held the box outside and like became like a viral face. But then he actually built like a serious company, and because of that, he like was able to bring that following along. And the
Mhm.
stuff he posts is like it feels like real milestones. It feels like real development. It makes me want to use the product, which I think
Yeah,
is
it's
like
true.
the
It's
key.
very substantive. Like he's managed to go from most people met him as a shit poster.
Yep.
And then he's managed to go from that to a serious founder without losing the personality and the humor. And that's kind of hard to do. Like if you're known for one thing, making that turn and being taken seriously can be hard. Like Bridget Mendler
Yeah.
had to deal with this in the beginning too, where
Sure.
people were referring to people still refer to her as like former Disney star. Like
Yeah.
that's not the only thing she is now, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not the
Yeah.
primary thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I would shout out Polymarket
Oh yeah.
and
I mean,
and the
crushing it.
founder Shane, whom I don't know. But Chris Best from Substack was telling me yesterday that they are having just a huge, huge moment, and they're sort of living proof in a company that the wisdom of the crowd is often better than the wisdom
Yeah,
of uh,
some random expert.
tastemakers in the media, or yeah, experts, pollsters, tastemakers. Like the top down approach has not worked at all so far this cycle, and the market's actually been
Yeah.
really good.
And I mean, you talk about format mattering. They are super thoughtful about no matter where you screenshot, Polymarket will be there. They put the Polymarket watermark on every chart, and
Oh,
so they've just
yeah.
created so many of these viral moments. And yeah, the founder Shane DM'd me and was like, "Hey man, like I know like you're work with Founders Fund. Like I appreciate like all the support." And I hadn't even thought about it. I was like,
It's
"Oh yeah, I guess Founders
incredible.
Fund did invest, but like that's not why I'm posting about Polymarket. Like I'm posting about
Yeah.
Polymarket because it's hilarious that there's a betting market for who will last longer, Biden or a head of lettuce. Like
The
this is
lettuce.
wild. Like
And they had all
the
these
world is just
pictures of the
weird.
lettuce. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was like a very photogenic lettuce,
Yeah, yeah,
and they
yeah,
had all these pictures and all these updates. By the way, amazing instincts by Shane
yeah,
to DM you and do that,
yeah, yeah.
because not everybody takes the time or sees the value in doing it, but it became a thing in your mind that you're now consciously thinking about supporting them as opposed to you did it once and moved on.
Yeah, 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 it's interesting to see like the secret of their success. I don't know that it's necessarily comms, but they certainly have like it feels like they've leapfrogged some of the other brands in the space that I've seen before, where liquidity has been a little bit lax. I mean, I heard about somebody put like $2 million on the election, which is like crazy numbers from
What
for
was the
prediction
bet?
market.
Like what
For
were they betting
Biden
on?
to win or something, or, I mean, it was notable because this person lost
RIP.
2,000,000.
Oh,
But
that's
the
brutal.
idea of finding a place with that deep of liquidity, it's a little bit abstract because most people think you can just bet any amount on anything, but that's not really the case in these
Yeah, yeah,
prediction
yeah.
markets. Although they did exist a decade ago, they didn't necessarily have the depth of liquidity to actually go and make a big big bet like $2 million on something.
That's
um
true.
yeah, it's pretty wild.
That's true. Sergey over there had made the point that this is a great opportunity for them to talk about the wisdom of markets and the crowd, which so far has actually favored Trump in a lot of ways. And if Trump wins, maybe they could use that to try to get themselves unbanned in the US. That would
Oh
be a big
yeah, that's
win.
smart. Yeah, do
Yeah.
like policy around it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
I wonder how much that's affecting them with, like, people being creative with VPNs and stuff. Probably a lot
yeah.
still, because like,
Probably a lot.
it's just always frictions everything. Imagine if you're approved on Facebook and then Apple Store, and then you go into the App Store and, it's just one click to bet on Biden or whatever, or bet on
Yeah.
Trump, like,
No, even on
obvious.
a website, like one extra click
Yeah.
will attrit
I
30% of
do
users or
love that
something.
that in the United States, I don't even need to use a VPN to get a screenshot because I'm not
Yeah.
a gambler, and I mean, I love Polymarket. Maybe I'll use it at some point, but I'm not really like gambling on politics. But I love that I can go and see because for me
Yeah.
it's news. For me,
Yeah,
it's
that's
not
true.
gambling. It's a news site. And I actually, when I was DMing with Shane, I said what I want is every news organization. The incentives are always aligned towards let's just get out like a daily or a weekly. Let's spam this person. Let's make everything sound important because we need to be constantly re-engaging people. So we could turn on the mainstream media, CNN, Fox News right now, and I bet it's like breaking news, something crazy happened, and we're like, could it possibly be crazier than an assassination attempt? Because that's my bar for breaking news
Well,
now.
on
And if you use
CNN
uh,
on CNN, it was no
oh
assassination
yeah, there's
attempt,
no
my
assassination.
friend.
But
What
at this point,
assassination
like
attempt?
I am so calibrated that unless something truly earth-shattering happens,
Yeah,
don't hit
exactly.
me with the breaking news. I got to
Yes.
pay attention. I don't want you in my inbox. I don't want you using all caps, no bold. like,
Yeah.
like, keep the formats very chill for a long time unless something really important happens. And
I'm
and
with
and
you.
so I was like, with Polymarket, you have the opportunity to set up a newsletter that only emails me when markets move. And so if
Mm,
I want to read all of the political news if the market shifts. If the market
mhm.
doesn't shift, I don't really care about the story. It
That's
probably isn't
interesting.
important. And
Yeah.
so and you could do the same thing for stocks or any of these things. Like, okay, is something happening? What is the market reacting? Okay, then as a casual observer, maybe you should get up to speed. Maybe you should go and read the long form story, read that 6,000 word profile, or read that full analysis, watch the YouTube
Mhm.
video. But you don't
Yeah.
just want to be endlessly consuming news necessarily.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really great point. I'm gonna try to find that and sign up too, or send me the link if you have it. This is it's a good way to just it's like Google News alerts, but it's like Google alerts for when something really matters. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Any final? I'll give a final thought for takeaway for founders from the past few days, and then you give one too. We'll just come up with them. But I think a good one is if you have an announcement planned, or if you as a founder were like planning to do something publicly and then everything pops off, like whether it's CrowdStrike on Friday or stuff over the weekend. Hopefully you weren't planning your announcement for Sunday anyway, but let's say that current events step on your announcement. What should you do? um, the default is try to retain the flexibility to move it. Even if you have a press exclusive lined up, like journalists want people to read their article. So it's totally fair to call the journalist and ask them if they could shift it by a couple days. You'll have to let everybody know, let employees and investors know so that nobody like goes and posts something on the original day. But you can shift it with the Cognition launch. Ashley Vance was the journalist who had the exclusive. And I feel very bad about this, but I think I moved it like 3 times because we are trying to avoid stuff happening in the news. And then the only exception would be if what you're doing is um, directly relevant to what's happening in the news,
Then
then you
push it
should
up.
push it up, like make it happen at the same time,
Yeah.
and talk about how this thing actually, like, you can ride off the virality of something both algorithmically and in terms of people's attention and how much they care. That's my takeaway. Do you have
Yeah.
one?
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess um the real tricky situation. I mean, didn't both the shooting and the dropping out happen on the weekend? I don't
Yeah,
remember.
the shooting was Saturday night.
Saturday. Okay, so not a lot of collisions with product announcements. Like no one actually
Mm-mm.
got screwed,
Not in this case.
um, but hypothetically, I guess I don't really have a great takeaway here. So I'm just gonna hit you with another question, and maybe you can give another riff. Hypothetically, what happens if I do a so if I do a product launch announcement and like if I'm waiting and then news happens, I can delay. It might be a hassle to call Ashley Vance and tell him I need a couple more days, but I can
Yeah.
do that and he's aligned, so it'll happen.
Yeah.
My question is, what happens if we went live at 9 a.m. and then at 10 a.m. there's a political assassination and you lost that? Like yeah, like you're just gone, like it's just done, it's over, I think. But
Yeah.
like, is there a way to recover? How do you do it?
Honestly, I think no shame in just running the play again when things have
Just delete
calmed
everything
down.
and just start over.
Yeah, just start over. Just do it again. I mean, if nobody saw it,
Yeah,
you can just
nobody
start
saw it.
over. And there's nothing saying that if you said it once, you can't say it again.
Yep.
And so um, you lose the this is the very first time we're coming out of stealth. But hopefully that wasn't a crutch for people to care. Like hopefully people didn't care just because you were
Yeah,
coming out of stealth,
yeah.
and there were other reasons, and you just present those other reasons again. Honestly, there are startups that I've looked at that came out of stealth like 3 months ago, and I kind of want to say if it didn't look like the coming out was had too much
It worked.
fanfare, so you
Yeah.
just do it
Do it
again,
again.
just launch again.
Yeah.
And it could be the next time you have an announcement, like it could be the next time you hit a new milestone technically, or launch a new product or forge a new partnership or something. You just reintroduce yourself to the world at
Yep.
that time.
Yeah, that makes a
But
ton
yeah,
of
that
sense.
that happens a lot and it really sucks.
Oh yeah, where you launch something at
You
9 and
launch and
then
then
something
something
else.
like lands
Obviously
on
not
top
like
of it.
political world changing news.
Could be
Um,
anything.
but
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's going to be some startup that comes out of stealth the morning, an hour before like GPT-5 comes out. It just
yeah,
happens to people.
fortunately, like for the most part, a lot of these things are knowable. I mean, you look at the cadence, especially on the AI stuff, like the
Mm.
cadence of like we know that it's gonna that the sequence of events is Apple's gonna book their event, and then OpenAI is gonna do theirs the day before, which I love, or Google's gonna do their event,
I
and
love
then
it.
Apple's gonna be later, and it's gonna be this whole thing, and then Microsoft will be in there. So these things are knowable, like with the you know with the fidelity of like a few weeks,
Maybe.
which is
Yeah.
good.
Although you do have stuff just dropping though,
Yeah, 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 that
which
is
I
true.
appreciate as
And
well.
Sam is the wild card where like he could just drop something. I doubt Google or Apple would ever just drop something. So you don't really need to worry about that. You mostly just need
Yeah.
to be really sharp to see the full calendar
Yeah.
of like
Mistral does this, which I really appreciate.
yeah.
Remember, they just like link to a torrent file.
Yep, yep. That was pretty awesome.
It was great. It was
Yeah.
great. All
At
right.
the same
Thank you
time, that
for
doesn't really like take over the internet in the same way that like a like a 2-hour OpenAI
it.
keynote will, because there's so much more to grasp on. In like you get the torrent, you got to download it, you got to install it, you got to run it. It's like a lot to like. It's not a lot of content for. It's not a lot of fodder. Whereas if there's 2 hours of Sam and his whole team talking, they can clip all sorts of stuff. There can be memes, there can be remixes, there can be demos. So you have the
Always.
AI.
Yeah.
It's a different thing.
Yeah, that's true. Well, no, thank you for raising that point because sometimes it's really big within a certain community but doesn't go wide.
Yep.
So I think with Mistral, it was really big with developers and AI geeks,
Yep.
and people really liked it. But my parents, for example, still have never even heard of the company,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
much less seen their launch.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Fun stuff.
Do we cover it?
I think
I
so.
think we covered it.
I
There's
think
a
we got
lot.
it.
I thought this would be. Thank you for doing this
Yeah, no worries.
experiment with me. I thought this would be like 7 minutes and boom, boom, boom. But there was actually a lot more when we started pulling on the strings. Thanks for
Yeah.
doing it.